If you've started playing Shadow Dungeon and are still trying to wrap your head around all the mechanics, rest assured, that's completely normal. In this video, I'm going to share 10 advanced tips I discovered during my runs that can help you make better decisions, save resources, and survive longer inside the dungeon. You might already know a few of these, but hopefully at least some will be useful to improve your experience in the game. I'm Matthew, and the video is about to start. One of the things I liked most in Shadow Dungeon is realizing that equipment isn't just about boosting numbers like damage, defense, or health. Many items can roll with affixes that grant extra skills, and that opens up plenty of room to build different combinations. At first, it's easy to ignore this possibility and pick an item solely for higher damage, but it's worth taking a careful look at what additional skills it offers. The main idea is to combine these equipment skills with the active nodes on your talent tree. If you're already investing in a specific skill, for example, an affix that adds another skill capable of complementing or triggering that same sequence, can make your build much more efficient. Instead of using each skill in isolation, you start creating a sort of combo chain where one part empowers or sets up the next. That's when I realized how much of a difference the skill chain system can make. When the affixes and the talent tree work in the same direction, the damage multiplier increases significantly, and the end result can be far greater than simply equipping the item with the highest attack stat. Of course, this depends on the build and available modifiers, but in some cases, the difference is truly impressive. So, one tip I'd give is, don't sell or discard a piece of gear just because its main attributes seem a bit inferior. First, check if it has an extra skill that matches your active talent nodes. This analysis might require a bit of testing, but finding a strong synergy between gear and talents can completely transform your build and make dungeon progression much smoother. Most ARPG and dungeon crawler players get stuck in that "I'll only keep what I'm using right now" mindset. But here, the storage system was designed for you to hoard on purpose. Having unlimited pages in your shared stash completely changes the farming logic. Instead of discarding maybe useful items, you store everything with varied templates and turn the stash into a build lab. What I like most about this mechanic is how it rewards long-term planning. Instead of rerunning the same content just to test a new attribute combination, you already have an arsenal of farmed pieces with different roles and sets ready to equip. This speeds up experimentation tremendously and allows you to adapt quickly to meta shifts, balance patches, or even just the itch to try out a crazy build you saw somewhere. It gives you that feeling of playing with an advantage because your prep time drops and your fun time increases. An advanced strategy I would adopt is treating side quests and challenges as inventory expansion routes. Whenever a quest appears rewarding page expansion items, stash slots, or something similar, prioritize it like a main progression objective. Shifting focus away from the campaign might seem tedious at first, but in the long run, you gain dozens or hundreds of storage pages, which essentially eliminates inventory pressure. This frees your mind to focus strictly on build optimization rather than space management. Anyone who approaches the infinite stash as a core progression element ends up with an inventory that functions almost like a database of possibilities. And when you finally decide to assemble that crit, damage over time, minion, or any other build, you already have the pieces in hand. It's this kind of system that makes you feel like every hour invested is actually building towards something bigger, rather than just farming for the sake of farming. A tip I consider essential is learning to view negative effects on weapons as part of your strategy, rather than simply a reason to discard them. Many higher-tier weapons offer impressive offensive bonuses capable of significantly boosting your damage output and speeding up combat. The catch is that this power usually comes paired with penalties that can compromise your survivability. That is where Affix management comes in. Before equipping a powerful weapon, observe exactly what negative effect it applies. Health drain, reduced regeneration, higher mana consumption, or another drawback. Depending on the penalty, the weapon might stop being a real upgrade and start hindering your progress. Because of this, looking at raw damage isn't enough. You need to evaluate the complete package. In my opinion, one of the best ways to offset these penalties is to invest in permanent health and mana regeneration stats. This way, you can keep aggressive weapons equipped without turning every fight into a struggle against your own character. Regeneration helps recover resources lost during exploration and can make these negative effects far more manageable. This is a more advanced strategy because it requires long-term planning. A weapon with a penalty might seem risky initially, but once your permanent regeneration is well developed, it can become one of the top options in your arsenal. So whenever you find a high-tier weapon, don't just assess the offensive bonus. Consider whether your build already has the resources to pay the price for that power. One thing I've noticed is that it's very much worth not treating the talent tree as a single linear path. Each class features 3 distinct trees, offering plenty of freedom to test different combinations. In the beginning, sticking to one path and dumping all your points into it might seem easier, but as the difficulty ramps up, a more balanced build often proves far more useful. My suggestion is to experiment with a hybrid distribution, mixing offensive capabilities with defensive or utility tools. That way, you don't rely solely on dealing massive damage to survive. Having extra resistance, a crowd control tool, or a mobility boost can make a substantial difference when enemies start pushing harder. This flexibility becomes even more compelling in the late game, especially once you have more points available to distribute. Instead of feeling forced to choose between pure damage and survival, try to craft a combination that leverages both sides. Sometimes, sacrificing a small fraction of damage results in a much more consistent and comfortable build to play. Because of this, don't be afraid to branch out from your class's primary tree. Test the nodes that seem to align best with your playstyle and observe which setups perform well inside the dungeons. The optimal build might not be the one that maximizes a single stat, but rather the one capable of dealing damage, withstanding hits, and offering more tools during combat encounters. Instead of just following the campaign and viewing bosses as obstacles you defeat once before moving on, the game encourages you to treat them as constant sources of progression. Knowing there are over 60 unique bosses, each with a chance to drop permanent epic items, shifts your mindset. Every encounter becomes a real opportunity to upgrade your build, not just a story checkpoint. What I love most about this approach is how it captures the essence of classic ARPGs while adding an extra layer of strategy. Mapping out fast routes in end-of-chapter areas using waypoints and optimized paths is essentially building your own item production line. You don't rely purely on generic loot drop luck. You choose which bosses to farm, which weapons or sets to prioritize, and target them almost surgically. This offers a sense of control many games in the genre lack, making every farming session feel more intentional. In practice, I would treat specific bosses as weekly targets or optimization routines. For instance, if I want to upgrade my main weapon, I identify which of the 60 bosses drop the best versions of that item type, and create a tight loop between the waypoint, the boss, the loot, and the reset. Over time, this becomes second nature. You know what to expect, which mechanics to prioritize for faster kills, and how to tweak your build for better survival on that specific route. It gives you the feeling of mastering the game rather than just reacting to it. This strategy makes total sense in a dungeon ARPG like Shadow Dungeon, where progression doesn't stop at the level cap. Repeatedly farming bosses becomes a natural part of upgrading gear, testing new setups, and preparing for harder dungeons. The great part is that with 60 options, you're never stuck in a single loop. There's always a new boss to add to the rotation, a new drop to chase, and a better version of the weapon you already like using. If you're playing classes like the Necromancer, minions stop being mere cannon fodder and start defining the pace of combat. The key lies in understanding how minion affixes can completely alter creature behavior. Items with specific affixes can convert standard skeletal warriors into far more efficient variants, such as death sentinels or specialized archers. This shift isn't just cosmetic, it fundamentally changes the role those skeletons fulfill in battle. While basic warriors excel at holding from front lines, archers assist with area control, and death sentinels provide focused damage and increased durability. Choosing the right minion type for each encounter makes all the difference. In my experience, prioritizing accessories and gear that directly modify your summon's behavior is key. Rather than just searching for items with increased damage or increased health, look for pieces that transform your skeletons or demons into utility options suited to your playstyle. If you find yourself dying quickly, crowd control-focused summons can stall enemies while you reposition. If damage is the bottleneck, prioritize offensive heavy minions. This qualifies as an advanced tip because it requires treating summons as part of a larger ecosystem rather than a passive side bonus. Every item that alters minion mechanics can shift your build's overall dynamic, so whenever you find an accessory or piece of gear with summon modifiers, ask yourself, does this make my skeletons or demons more useful for what I need right now? If the answer is yes, it's likely worth investing in. Early on, it's easy to fall into the trap of equipping whatever piece shows a higher number in attributes. More attack, more defense, more health. In Shadow Dungeon, that works up to a point, but the game was designed with 15 class-exclusive armor sets in mind. In other words, even if a standalone item looks better on paper, The bonus for completing a set almost always yields more actual power than stacking isolated modifiers. The secret is treating armor sets as the core of your build. When you activate a full set bonus, it typically grants effects that loose items cannot replicate. Increased damage on specific skills, cooldown reduction, skill triggers on attack, or automatic defensive buffs. You stop gaining mere numerical increases and start acquiring mechanics that alter how your class plays. In practice, this means holding onto weaker individual pieces is worth it if they belong to a set you're assembling, rather than swapping them out for random gear just because a single attribute is higher. The ideal approach is to decide early which set to target for your class. Farm with that goal in mind, and optimize secondary stats only afterward. Ignoring this often leads to mid-game plateaus because damage and survivability simply don't scale the same way. When you construct your build around a set and align your skills to leverage those triggers, the game transitions from a constant struggle into a much more satisfying loop of farming and progression. The game makes it clear that the magic isn't just about high damage, health, or defense numbers, but in how your skills communicate with each other through your gear. Once you start viewing every piece of equipment as a puzzle piece in a chain activation system, everything shifts. A mythical or legendary item with well-chosen triggers is worth far more than any piece with impressive raw stats. What I appreciate most about this design is how it rewards layered thinking. Instead of simply evaluating, this item gives more damage, you start thinking, this item causes my main skill to trigger another skill that clears the screen, which in turn applies a damage over time effect that triggers a heal or shield. It's about constructing cascading combos that operate almost autonomously, where hitting a few buttons lets the built-in synergies handle the rest. This creates a sense of build intelligence few ARPGs manage to deliver. In practice, I would approach the Blacksmith as an essential part of the character building process. Testing, re-rolling, tweaking, and retesting until you find strong synergies is the way forward. Spending resources to re-roll a legendary item with promising triggers is often better than farming another piece with higher stats that lacks synergy with the rest of your gear. Over time, you develop an eye for working combinations. You learn which skills trigger others more frequently, which chain effects clear enemy waves most efficiently, and which triggers grant survivability without sacrificing damage. This approach transforms Shadow Dungeon into a game of continuous experimentation. Every new item picked up presents a question. Does this fit into my current combo? Does this enable a new activation chain? And when you finally assemble a build where everything clicks, the screen clears automatically, and you feel nearly invincible, the reward goes far beyond watching numbers go up. It's the feeling that you truly understood the game and crafted something unique, tailored specifically to your playstyle. Each class features 3 talent trees, making 12 trees available in total across the game. Interestingly, as you progress, skill points cease to be a strict constraint, opening up space for far bolder experimentation. For this reason, I highly recommend exploring talent tree hybrids early on, rather than locking yourself into a single pure tree. Blending skills and passives from different trees within the same class can yield surprising combinations. For instance, a necromancer taking a few passives from the ranger tree can gain mobility, crowd control, or range damage that complements minions and the class's baseline survival strategy exceptionally well. The same logic applies to combining elements across other class archetypes, especially when you can access similar talents or effects through gear. A mage incorporating paladin elements, for example, can become significantly sturdier and capable of holding ground in melee range, something outside the class's traditional focus. Decisions like these convert a standard build into something unique, and often far stronger than following the default path recommended by the game. In my opinion, the major mistake is viewing talent trees as fixed and final from the start. Since there is no real point cap in the late game, the design actively encourages testing different configurations. So whenever you level up or find an item that unlocks new talents, ask yourself, what can I take from another tree that will make my build more complete? Sometimes the answer will lead to truly broken setups in Shadow Dungeon. Early on, players tend to hoard resources at the Blacksmith, out of fear of spending gold and materials on gear that will soon be replaced. That cautious stance severely holds back your progression. The game was designed for aggressive use of the Blacksmith, enhanced to the cap, which hovers around +20, and focused primarily on pieces featuring strong skill triggers. What truly changes isn't just the flat damage or defense values, but how specific items begin triggering skills automatically or with higher frequency. Reinforcing gear with a valuable trigger turns it from just another item into a central pillar of your build. Because of this, my rule is simple. If an item possesses an effect that aligns with my intended class setup and style, I look to upgrade it immediately, even if it's an intermediate piece. Rerolling affixes and special skills is another tool many underutilize. The initial cost can be intimidating, but once you secure a solid base item, with the exact attribute and effect types your build demands, investing resources to fine-tune the details pays off. That is how you turn a nearly perfect item into a core piece of a setup, particularly when aiming for synergy with the 15 armor sets and skill triggers. Ultimately, don't fear sinking resources into mid-game items that unlock new build possibilities. In Shadow Dungeon, what unlocks content most effectively isn't just hitting the level cap, but equipping gear that makes your skills harmonize. Leveraging the Blacksmith Aggressively, maxing out enhancements, rerolling good base items, and prioritizing triggers is what turns a generic character into a consistent farming and damage-dealing powerhouse.